The operator barely got the words out before the line went wild. 911, your emergency. A voice interrupted, panicked but composed. He's hit another bank. Same disguise, same method. He's gone. By the time the police arrived, it was too late again. In the Pacific Northwest, there was a name whispered like a ghost story Hollywood. Not the city, not the industry. A man. A phantom. A myth. He wore masks like an actor, but his stage was the lobby of your neighborhood bank. His scripts were silent. His exits were perfect. And for years he pulled off heist after heist without leaving so much as a fingerprint. No one knew where he came from. No one could predict where he'd strike next. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just a criminal. This was a man who turned bank robbery into performance art. This is the story of William Scott Skurlock, America's most elusive thief, whose final act would be his most tragic. It didn't start in a vault or behind a mask. It began on a tomato farm in Hawaii. In the 1970s, a young Skurlock was just another teenager working the soil. But one day, buried among the tomatoes, he found something else growing, marijuana. Curious and reckless, he took some, sold it, made a quick buck. Then more, the money rolled in, but so did trouble. The farm owner caught on and Skurlock was fired. No second chances, no warnings, just out. But getting fired didn't stop him, it fueled him. He moved on to Evergreen State College in Washington, a place known for progressive ideals and creative freedom. There, Skurlock studied organic chemistry and biochemistry, but what he really learned was how to cook crystal meth. By the time most students were cramming for finals, Skurlock was manufacturing narcotics in the school's labs. He stayed for 6 years, not because he was failing, but because he was building an empire, one that fed the Northwest's growing appetite for methamphetamines. Eventually, his empire collapsed. A professor stumbled upon one of his secret labs. He was expelled instantly. But if Evergreen thought it had rid itself of the problem, they underestimated Skurlock. He didn't retreat. He relocated. Deep in the woods, away from prying eyes, he continued cooking. For the next 10 years, he lived as a ghost, providing addicts their fix, until 1990, when a single bullet changed everything. His supplier, the man who provided him with the chemicals he needed, was murdered. And just like that, Skurlock's meth business crumbled. But instead of seeing it as a wake-up call, he saw it as a pivot point. Drugs were done, but crime? That wasn't over. It was just beginning. He was going to rob banks, and he wasn't going to do it alone. Skurlock reached out to an old friend, Mark Biggins. A thrill-seeker like him, they needed someone to drive. So they convinced Biggins' girlfriend, Tracy, to join the team. 3 players. One plan. Their first hit was on June 25, 1992. A bank in Seattle's upscale Madison Park neighborhood. The strategy? Disguise, speed, and fear. Skurlock wore heavy makeup and a false nose. Biggins, a plastic Ronald Reagan mask, grinning ear to ear. They stormed in, shouted, took the cash, ran. But they didn't think it through. Their escape was a disaster. They tried to flee across a golf course in broad daylight. Witnesses spotted them instantly, 2 grown men sprinting through manicured greens with duffel bags of stolen money. It wasn't Hollywood. It was amateur hour. But Skurlock was nothing if not a fast learner. He wanted to elevate his craft, turn theft into theater. He brought in a third friend, Steve Myers, an artist with a knack for detail. Together they ditched the masks and went full prosthetic, noses, chins, cheekbones. Skurlock began studying bank procedures like a scholar. Employee manuals, vault access protocols, even police patrol patterns. He watched, waited, practiced, perfected. Soon they developed code words. Each dollar bill was scanned post-heist for tracking devices. Surveillance became second nature. With every robbery, they evolved. But not everyone was ready for a life of crime. After that chaotic first hit, Biggins backed out. Tracy disappeared. So Skurlock went solo. And this time he went back to the same bank. Most robbers would never do that. It was insane. Risky, bold. That's exactly why Skurlock did it. He wore a new disguise, walked in with calm authority, waved his handgun, but never used it, and walked out with $88,000. It was a clean job. But it wasn't the money that thrilled him. It was the control, the rush. That robbery earned him a new nickname, the Takeover Bandit, because when Skurlock entered a bank, he didn't sneak around. He took command, calm, collected, terrifying. He wasn't there to kill, just to dominate. As his confidence grew, so did his ambitions. He brought Myers into the fold fully, not just as a friend, but as a lookout. Myers parked outside the banks, scanning police channels. If a 911 call went out, he'd alert Skurlock through a walkie-talkie. They got good. Too good. They hit 5 banks in a single year. One heist alone netted them $252,000. Skurlock buried the money in secret plots of land, spending only what he needed, and always giving a cut to those who helped, not out of kindness, out of strategy. He wanted loyalty and silence. He even considered himself a modern Robin Hood, donating to environmental causes and rape crisis centers. But the truth? He kept the lion's share for himself. A typical cut for Myers, $5,000. Skurlock, over $90,000, because he believed he deserved it. After all, he took the risks. He made the plan. He wore the mask. In 1993, Skurlock struck again, this time on the day before Thanksgiving. A cold Seattle morning, same bank, same strategy. Different disguise. He got $98,000, buried most of it, spent the rest sparingly. By now the FBI was watching. Hard. They didn't know who he was, but they called him Hollywood because of the dramatic makeup, the calm delivery, and the movie-quality planning. Surveillance footage showed everything but his real face. He was a phantom. That year, Skurlock robbed 5 banks in 2 cities. In one case, he abandoned a robbery entirely because Myers caught a suspicious police transmission. That's what made him dangerous. He wasn't greedy. He was patient. But 1994 brought a new problem, Portland. They wanted to expand outside Seattle, hit fresh targets, but the city wasn't kind to them. Skurlock aborted one robbery after it started going south. The layout was wrong. The timing was off. He panicked. They fled. Back in Seattle, their next job earned them a meager $1,796. Skurlock buried it anyway. It wasn't about the amount. It was about the ritual, the gain. He lived in a treehouse, yes, a literal treehouse built deep in the woods with his closest friends. They claimed they stayed up for days on meth to finish it. It had secret rooms, underground compartments, hidden escape routes. It was his fortress, his Eden, but nothing lasts forever. In 1995, a job at First Interstate Bank went sideways. The vault was nearly empty. He grabbed what he could, about $11,000, but didn't realize bank tellers had slipped in die packs. Moments after the getaway, one exploded, staining his hands and the cash in bright red ink. He threw the money out the window. Lesson learned. Weeks later, he returned to his favorite target, Madison Park, the same bank he'd hit twice before. This time it was a gold mine, nearly $300,000 in clean, unmarked bills. His biggest take yet, and then he vanished. No robberies, no sightings, no clues for a year. But the FBI wasn't sleeping. They were analyzing every robbery, tracking patterns, noticing that Hollywood always struck when he seemed to need cash roughly every 6 weeks. They began setting traps, staking out old targets, preparing for the next hit. They didn't know it yet, but Skrleck was preparing too. And when he came back, he brought everyone with him. Biggins returned. Myers stayed on lookout, and Skrleck was hungrier than ever. He planned to hit 3 banks in one day, one final score, one last job before walking away forever. It was November 27th, 1996, Thanksgiving Eve. The weather was rough. The skies threatened rain. Traffic was heavy. Inside a Seafirst Bank branch in Lake City, employees were getting ready to close. Customers stood in line, watching the clock. Then a man in a hooded coat walked in. His face was off. Unsettling. Something didn't feel right. Then came the second man, larger, bolder. "This is a robbery," the first one said, pulling a black pistol. Nobody move. Within minutes, they had control. Vault open, duffel bag full, and then gone. But they didn't get far. Not this time. A customer followed them outside, took down their plates, called 911, and for the first time in years, the police were too close. That was the last time anyone saw William Scott Skrleck alive. Rain hammered the streets of Seattle as headlights sliced through the evening fog. Somewhere in the storm, a van was on the move, fast, erratic, dangerous. Inside it, William Scott Skrleck, Mark Biggins, and Steve Myers. 3 men, $1 million in cash, and the final robbery behind them. But they weren't celebrating. They were scrambling. A customer had followed them outside, taken note of the getaway vehicle, dialed 911. Now, police cruisers prowled the area like wolves. The trio had always been masters of vanishing into the mist, but this time the weather wasn't on their side. Thanksgiving traffic clogged every road. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder. That van, the blue Dodge Caravan, wasn't their real escape. It was a decoy, what they called a drop car, bought with cash, registered under a false name, outfitted for a single job, then discarded. Inside, they wiped down every surface with bleach. Gloves, bleach, burn the rags, bury the ashes. No DNA, no prints, no mistakes. But there was one. The police were closer than ever. Skrleck knew it before anyone said a word. He could feel it in his gut, the way the wind shifted, the way headlights lingered a second too long. He was being hunted. He turned to Biggins. "We need to ditch the van, now." And they pulled into a side street in the Ravenna neighborhood and made the switch. A white Chevrolet Astro van was waiting nearby another drop car. They were ghosts again, or so they thought. Officers from the Puget Sound Violent Crimes Task Force had already spotted the first van, and they were tailing it. No sirens, no announcements, just headlights in the fog, silent pressure. Inside the van, the robbers could feel it. Suspicion rising like steam. Myers rifled through the cash bags on the floor. Are there trackers in here? They tore open bundles, eyes wild. Scurlock's paranoia surged. If there were tracking devices in the cash, the chase was over before it began. He didn't wait to be pulled over. He stopped the van and stepped out with a 12-gauge shotgun. The standoff was instant, tense, electric. Scurlock raised the weapon, pointed it directly at the unmarked car trailing them. But when he pulled the trigger, nothing. A misfire. The moment shattered. Officers responded with immediate gunfire. Bullets thudded into the van's side as Myers and Biggins ducked. Scurlock dove back in, shouted, "Drive!" They roared forward. Just a few blocks later, they stopped again. Myers slid open the side door and returned fire with his own shotgun. Shells exploded into the night, but he was lucky no one hit him, and he wasn't hit either. Scurlock floored the gas pedal. Then came the twist. The rear window of the van shattered outward as someone inside opened fire with a semi-automatic M14 rifle. It was war now on residential streets. In the middle of a neighborhood, Scurlock killed the headlights, punched the accelerator. The van jerked forward, out of control, and then he jumped. He leapt from the moving vehicle like a soldier abandoning ship. Behind him, the van careened off the road and smashed into a house. Police swarmed. Inside the wreckage, they found Myers and Biggins, wounded and stunned. But Scurlock? Gone. The van was a treasure trove of evidence. Authorities recovered $1.08 million in cash, two 12-gauge shotguns, a military-grade M14 rifle, two 9mm pistols, police scanners, radios, gloves, and makeup kits. But their prize was still at large, the mastermind, the myth, Hollywood. Myers broke first. Bleeding, dazed, and shaken in the hospital, he gave them a name, William Scott Scurlock. He lived in Olympia. The manhunt ignited instantly. Seattle police, FBI, King County SWAT all mobilized. Officers canvassed neighborhoods door to door. K-9 units tracked for miles. Helicopters circled. No one knew where Scurlock had gone, but they knew one thing. He was armed. He was desperate, and he had nothing to lose. The storm raged through the night. Cold rain, heavy wind, power outages across the city. It was the perfect cover. Thanksgiving morning, two brothers, Robert and Ronald Walker, arrived at their grandmother's house for dinner. She lived just blocks from the crash site. Out back, there was a 10-foot camper trailer. Their grandma, Wilma, had told them police had already searched the backyard, but something felt off. The camper was locked. The back door was bolted. Yet there was a small hatch near the front, just big enough for someone slim to crawl through. The brothers climbed up, peered inside, and froze. There, curled in the dark, was a man. He matched the description. Disheveled, armed, alive, they called the cops. Within minutes, law enforcement surrounded the trailer. SWAT teams positioned themselves. Rifles pointed. Tear gas ready. Then a shot. It came from inside. Silence followed. Officers returned fire, unsure if it was a warning or the end. They waited, then breached. Inside the camper, they found him. William Scott Scurlock, dead from a single self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. He was 41 years old. The man who had haunted Seattle for years, who had robbed over a dozen banks, who had buried hundreds of thousands of dollars beneath the trees, who had studied heists like poetry, who dressed like an actor and vanished like smoke. Gone. The final chapter wasn't a shootout. It wasn't prison. It was solitude. A locked trailer. A cold morning and silence. After his death, authorities descended on his infamous treehouse. Hidden deep in the Washington woods, it stood like something from a fairy tale. A multi-level wooden castle wrapped around ancient trees, connected by rope bridges and secret ladders. Inside they found it all, a secret underground room, $220,000 in cash, makeup kits, disguises, a framed photo of Buffalo Bill, 7 pairs of Converse sneakers, weapons, maps, notes. It was the lair of a man who had built his entire life on running and knew it would someday end. Myers and Biggins both recovered from their injuries. In court, they were sentenced to 21 years each in federal prison. Myers was released in 2013. Biggins followed in 2015. Both now live quietly, away from the spotlight, their days of robbery buried in memory. 2 years after Scurlock's suicide, his beloved treehouse collapsed. Wind, rain, gravity, just like its builder, gone. But that wasn't the end. 6 officers who'd been involved in the final shootout sued Scurlock's estate for emotional trauma. His mother and sisters were forced to sell his land to pay the restitution, settle debts, and close the books on a life that had unraveled so many others. And what about the man behind the myth? Scurlock wasn't always a criminal. He once dreamed of becoming a doctor. He once gave to environmental causes. He once lived high in the trees, believing he could escape the world. But the truth? He was running from it. Every disguise, every vault, every getaway. A man building a fantasy so elaborate he couldn't find the way back, and maybe didn't want to. This wasn't just a story about a bank robber. This was a story about the cost of obsession, of masks worn for so long they become the skin, of chasing a high so thrilling that it drowns everything else, even your way out, even your soul. Now the news broke like thunder. The Hollywood bandit is dead. By Thanksgiving morning, the headlines flooded every television screen in the Pacific Northwest. For years, William Scott Scurlock had made the FBI look like fools. The police look slow, and the public feel both terrified and weirdly enchanted. Now he was gone. A single gunshot. A locked camper. No farewell note. No final words. Just a corpse and a duffel bag full of unanswered questions. But what stunned the world wasn't just how he died. It was how ordinary his ending was. For a man who had once vanished through forests and outrun helicopters, Scurlock's last act wasn't a heist. It was a surrender, quiet, solitary, bloody. Still, even in death, Hollywood refused to let go of the spotlight. When investigators swept through his sprawling, hand-built treehouse, it was like stepping into the mind of a mad genius. Hidden behind wooden panels and false walls were layers of secrets. A tunnel beneath the floor led to an underground chamber filled with wigs, prosthetics, costume-grade makeup, surgical gloves, a mannequin wearing one of his disguises, and multiple wallets with different names. He hadn't just planned his robberies. He lived them. Day and night, surrounded by alternate identities, he rehearsed every move like a Broadway actor before opening night. But the most disturbing find? A wall of photos, mugshots, surveillance stills, newspaper clippings, all connected by red yarn, pinned and labeled. But they weren't of his victims, they were of himself. Every image ever captured from a bank security camera, every blurry angle, every disguise, every mask. He'd studied himself like prey, watched his legend grow in the media, fed off it. He wasn't just robbing banks, he was chasing a legacy. And behind the cameras, the face of that legacy was collapsing. The truth was, Skurlock had been spiraling for years. The thrill was fading. The paranoia was growing. The money, despite the millions, was never enough. He trusted no one, not even Myers or Biggins. He tested them constantly, lied to them about his whereabouts. Once he buried $400,000 in cash in a metal box, then moved it a week later without telling anyone, just to see if it would magically disappear. And every time he handed them a few thousand after a robbery, he would say the same thing with a smirk. If I go down, I'm not taking the stairs alone. By 1996, law enforcement wasn't just watching his favorite banks, they were watching the pattern of his mind. FBI profilers noticed a chilling calculation in Skurlock's methods. He didn't just plan for success, he planned for disaster. Every job had a backup identity, a fallback car, a fake address, an exit strategy, a suicide plan. He had no illusions. He knew he wasn't going to grow old, and he never wanted to. Despite that, something drove him to pull off one last hit, the final one, the big one, the retirement job. That fantasy kept him alive, and it's what finally got him killed. But perhaps the most bone-chilling twist of all, the FBI missed him by 1 hour. An agent assigned to monitor Skurlock's known drop cars had been in the Lake City area the same evening. But due to a miscommunication about vehicle descriptions, they focused on the wrong car. Had the dispatcher said blue Caravan instead of gray van, the entire robbery might have been intercepted before it began. $1 million would never have been stolen. No bullets fired, no lives shattered, no suicide. Instead, the final scene unfolded like something out of a tragic noir film. Blood on hardwood, rain on metal, a pistol in a lifeless hand. But Skurlock's story didn't end with a death report. In fact, it was just beginning. In the months after his suicide, something unexpected happened. He became a myth. Documentaries aired, authors wrote books. College professors used him in lectures on criminal psychology. His treehouse, even in ruins, became a pilgrimage site for curiosity seekers and conspiracy theorists. Online forums lit up with rumors. Skurlock faked his death. Someone else was in the camper. There's still buried money out there. One man even claimed to have found a steel box deep in the woods containing $50,000, a fake beard, and a note that simply read, "Nice try, boys." Was it real? No one could prove it. But that was the thing about Hollywood. He always made you wonder. Back in Olympia, Skurlock's family kept quiet. His mother, once proud of her son's academic brilliance, never spoke to the press. His 2 sisters moved away, changed their names. They sold his land to pay off lawsuits filed by traumatized officers from the final shootout. But they couldn't sell his legacy. They couldn't erase the story. The man who once cooked meth in a college lab had become the stuff of legend. The environmentalist who robbed banks. The gentle friend who bought groceries for single mothers and then vanished with hundreds of thousands stuffed in the trunk of a stolen car. He was a contradiction with a pistol, a philosopher with a vault key, a dreamer who couldn't stop running. But here's the final gut punch, the most shocking twist of all. William Scott Scurlock was offered a way out. According to FBI files declassified years later, in 1995, just 1 year before his final heist, Scurlock had been under quiet surveillance. A former college professor who recognized him from old mugshots reported him anonymously, claiming he was hiding in plain sight in Olympia. The FBI, instead of arresting him immediately, proposed a sting operation. They wanted to flip him, use him to infiltrate other criminal networks. But the agent set to approach him posing as a casual friend never got the chance. Why? Because Scurlock never showed up to their meeting. He had gotten spooked. Someone somewhere tipped him off. To this day, no one knows who. Was it Myers? Biggins? One of his other hidden contacts? Or did Scurlock have a sixth sense of paranoia so finely tuned that he knew when the walls were closing in? All we know is after that missed meeting, he went dark for nearly 10 months. No robberies, no sightings, no movement, just silence. Then suddenly he resurfaced for the biggest robbery of his life and died. Some say it was guilt. Others say it was ego. But maybe it was something else entirely. Maybe it was all part of the script. The final act of a man who never planned to survive the credits. And now, decades later, we're still watching, still asking, still wondering, was Hollywood just a thief? Or was he something more? A mirror to our obsession with fame, risk, and escape? A reminder that no matter how clever your disguise, no matter how fast you run, the one thing you can never outsmart is yourself. If this story shook you, leave a like, share it, and subscribe for more haunting true crime stories that will leave you breathless. And remember, legends don't always live forever. Sometimes they self-destruct, loud and unforgettable.